Take you back to the Western Cape, where the G20 National Education Basic Indaba is beginning today. Now, the event will be led by the Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube and her deputy, Dr. Reginah Mhaule. I understand now the minister is on the podium. Let's listen in.
To champion the foundations of learning in not only in our country, but also in the broader global stage. Today we will hear from leaders and partners who are already showing us what is possible when policy, financing, and community action come together. And for those of you who've heard the story, I will tell it again and again because I do believe that it is one that truly captures for me the essence of why we do what we do. I often talk about the tale of the two 10-year-olds in the South African education system, who grow up to both take what we call the Pearls International Benchmarking Test. But these two 10-year-olds come from vastly two different backgrounds. On the one end, you have a child who comes from a well-resourced home, a home of means, where they're able to be read to, where they have access to educational toys, where they're able to access an early childhood care program, where they're able to essentially have trained practitioners, nutritious meals every day. By the time they get to grade R, they're able to read and write and count confidently. They are able to take on the challenges of foundation phase. And that child, by the time they get to grade 4, they are able to read and read for meaning and confidently. The second 10-year-old child, and this is where it becomes different and painful, the second 10-year-old child comes from a family, perhaps not of means, where reading is not a culture at home, where they don't have access to books, where they don't have access to educational toys, and they get to grade R and they are unable to read or read for meaning or calculate confidently. They get through foundation phase, they are unable to read and are not as cognitively developed as their other counterparts. Both of these children will get to grade 4, they'll take the same international benchmarking test, and the other child will fail. Not because they're any less capable, but because the system hasn't catered for them. It's a system that didn't look at whether or not this child has a nutritious meal, whether or not this child has access to books, whether or not this child is able to read and read for meaning by the time that they get to grade 4. And so, ladies and gentlemen, for me, that is the moral challenge of our time. How do we bridge the gap between the two 10-year-olds, and how do we make sure that the majority of South African learners who fall within the second category are in fact given a fair chance to be able to not only get through school, to read for meaning, to calculate confidently, but also to take on difficult subjects like maths, science, and accounting, because they've been given the strong foundations right at the beginning. And so this is why, for me, the priority of our G20 speaks to the heart of what needs to be our priority as the education system going forward. Because if we get the foundations of learning right, we won't obsess about whether or not children are taking maths and science when they get to matric. We won't obsess about the matric pass rate and whether we're hitting those notes, because that will already be set from the very foundations of learning. And so I really hope that we use this opportunity of having this chairpersonship of the G20 to not only just talk about this issue in the country, but also to place it on the global stage. In the global south, let us be the leaders that are needed to really advocate for the chances that our children need. And that, for me, is the way in which we will undo the inequality that still shapes our country. And so we must never forget the human face of what we do. Building an education system where both children, regardless of where they come from, are able to have access to quality education. What the Indaba have given us is a real picture on the ground, ladies and gentlemen. They have shown us of what is working, where the gaps remain, and how communities themselves are responding. This is the knowledge that must inform our reforms. Our provincial MECs of education have played a central role in this journey. Today, they will share their highlights and commitments from their provincial dialogues. These reports will serve as roadmaps for us going forward. They will tell us what we are able to take and make into real reform. They are the building blocks of South Africa's contribution to the G20 Education Working Group. A number of provinces are facing severe financial constraints. They're struggling to pay for learning and teaching materials, for scholar transport, for infrastructure programs and other essential services. And this is why we are facilitating the development of a financial recovery plans for each province that will also include the verifications of warm bodies to flush out ghost teachers who drain the cost of employee budgets, to flush out ghost learners who drain the norms and standards budgets. We have a thorny road ahead of us to turn around the financial situation of provincial departments of education, but we have no other choice. We must cut our garments to fit our cloth. To deal with some of the systemic issues, we have operationalized the National Education and Training Council, an advisory body made up of experts who will advise on a minimum integrated package of support to schools offering the foundation phase, on how we should strengthen our resourcing model for our schools, as well as reviewing the promotion and progression policies in the system. We are working on finding long-term solutions to the more systemic challenges facing our sector, and we are going to be evidence-led in doing so. Colleagues, I'm looking forward to the contribution of our learners. I think too often young people are spoken to but not listened to. And so today they'll take their rightful place in this dialogue. Alongside them are the voices of education professionals, unions, researchers, and community organizations. Today, they represent the collective wisdom that must guide us, because nothing about them without them. This national Indaba is not the end point. It is a convergence, a moment to listen, to reflect, and to move forward with clarity and determination. What we decide and what we commit to here today will shape not only our presidency of the G20, but the future of our education system in the years that lie ahead. And so let us leave this room not only inspired, but mobilized. Let us take the insights we gather here today and translate them into action. Let us strengthen our partnerships and commit to reforms that are bold but yet realistic, and ensure that South Africa's presidency of the G20 leaves a lasting legacy for our learners, for our educators, and for our country as a whole. Together, we must strategically reorientate the system to strengthen the foundations of learning by expanding access to early childhood development and improving the quality of literacy and numeracy outcomes in our country. That, for me, becomes one of the single most important things that we can do in our education system. Making sure that our children are able to read for meaning, so that they can go on and take on difficult subjects, so that when they leave our education system, they leave it with a quality product in their hand. Whether they are acquiring skills of the future, whether they are going on to acquire university degrees, we must get the foundations right, and we must lay that foundation. Together, we must ensure that every learner has strong foundations that give them literacy and numeracy tools to thrive. I look forward to your contributions. I look forward to the robust discussions we will have today. And I look forward to taking on some of the outcomes of today's, to making sure that we map our roadmap ahead in order for us to strengthen our education system together. Ndiyabulela.
Thank you very much.
That's Basic Education Minister there, Siviwe Gwarube, at the Basic Education in Indaba, just giving that opening address there. And the minister outlining a myriad of challenges still facing the sector, from improving reading for comprehension in the early grades to bridging the gap in under-resourced schools and ensuring that every learner has a fair chance at success. As you may be aware by now, the Indaba has brought together educators, unions, civil society and government to chart a way forward, as well as talk about some of those pressing issues in the basic education sector.